Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Mm.
And we are on, of course, the Shema, the last little section of Va'ed Hanan. And I'm just going to, for the time being, I'm going to stick with the Rashis. I'm going to do the best I can on it, and we'll see. So, so notice, by the way, of course, we're familiar with saying Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed when we quote the Shema in our prayers, in our daily worship, and we notice it's not here. It's not here. I have a theory as to why it's in there, and my theory is there is a custom, or even perhaps it's a halacha, that if you make a bracha that is levatala, meaning you shouldn't have made that bracha, or you shouldn't have made a bracha at all, and you want to sort of cover yourself by saying, I wasn't trying to do this out of impudence or out of rebellion or anger, whatever. Uh, you add Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed, which it's a way of saying, I apologize if I did not do something properly. And so the question is, when we say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, um, is Adonai really our Eloheinu? How sincere are we when we say Shema Yisrael? And do we actually treat God as Eloheinu? And so just covering ourselves, just in case, we really aren't sincere when we say it, we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed. And one might argue, of course, that, well, why say it at all then? And I think the answer is this, that not saying it all is worse than saying it and maybe not really, or not really meaning it, and not really being entirely truthful. Because if you say it and you realize you might not be saying it entirely truthfully, it could act as a springboard for you to try to understand what you're saying and to say it sincerely. And that is a lot better than simply not saying it at all, even though you might not be saying it as sincerely as we really should. So that's the reason why we add the words Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed. We actually whisper them, except on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we say it out loud, the only day that we do say it out loud. And there are reasons for all of this too. There might be one reason that we say it out loud is because it is Yom Kippur. And it is a day on which, of course, we are trying to look into ourselves and confess our sins. And we want to let God know that we really are doing that, so that in that way it's better. And the reason why we whisper it at all other times is because it's not here. It's not a quotation. It doesn't have the same place as the rest of the Shema. It's actually something we added ourselves. So we whisper it, not to say it out loud, not to give the impression that we are also quoting from the Torah in this particular place. So there we go. Right. So now, of course, what I think is the foundation, or one of the foundations of our tradition and what our religion is all about, the ahavta, and you shall love, right? Et Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your Elohim, the Lord your God, b'chol levavcha, with all your heart, u'b'chol nafshecha, and with all your soul, u'b'chol b'modecha, and with all your being. Let's call it that. We could say, and with all your substance, couldn't understand it that way. With all your effort, could be that too. We have those ideas. Let's take a look at the Rashi. And then there's, of course, some more to be said about that. Ve'avta, this is now taken from the Sifrei. Aseh Dvarav, perform his words, me'ahava. So this is not a command. He says, one who performs his words from love. Eino domeh does not look like ose me'ahava. Let's see, unless it is, sorry. Lo ose me'ira. Okay, so I'm going to go back now. Forgive me, I have certainly looked at it. Okay, so this is a period. There's no, okay, all right. Make sure. Okay, right. Okay, so I think this is sort of a semicolon there, right? One who does his words from love is not like not the same, not the same. It's not similar. And then this is an explanation. Or sem ava, one who does it out of love, lo sem is not like one who does out of fear. In other words, do it because I would say, out of appreciation. That appreciation might be perhaps one of the best expressions of love that we can have, one of the purest expressions of love that we can have. All right, so ha'oseh etzel, here we go. Ha'oseh etzel rabo me'irah. In a case of one who performs the will of his master out of fear, keshehu matriach alav, it could be when his master overburdens him, menicho v'olechlo, he leaves his master and goes his own way. Interesting statement, because it's suggesting that there are times when we face, adversity, and still have to love God. That when you truly love someone, adversity isn't going to make you run away. That you'll still continue the relationship with that person. And certainly in a case here where we're talking about the relationship of a servant to a master, if a servant loves his master, then he's going to hang in there. Yeah, Mike, what's up?
When you say adversity, you mean like adversary, like adversarial
No,
countries?
adversity means troubles. When you face illness, when you face things in life that make life difficult, that's adversity. We all do.
I thought you were giving me permission.
Mm, heaven forbid.
Yeah, they call China adversarial, right, an adversary.
Yes, yes, right. Means
That's
something
safe.
in opposition. Something in this case in opposition to your feeling happy and secure and that life's sweet. So yeah, okay. It's of course, a general description. Going on with b'chol levavcha, so with all your heart. So the issue here is the word for heart is lev. And why this other bit here? Why doesn't it say bechol libcha, right? Or why does it say levavcha? And here's the interpretation. Bishne yitzrecha. It means with both your inclinations. That is, both with your inclination to do good and your inclination to do wickedness. What do we mean? Okay, so the one seems relatively easy. In other words, loving God with all the righteous things that come out that occur to you to do, that's okay. What about your dark side, right? What about those elements within you which are not so good? And the answer is serving God and loving God in that way is not doing those things, even though you're so tempted to, that you're saying, God would not allow me to do this, and so I'm not going to do it. And I think it fits pretty much neatly into the positive commandments, which are telling you to do things, which would be the the Yetzer HaTov, and the negative commandments, which warn you against doing other things, which certainly would fit with the Yetzer Hara, so that you are also serving God with your Yetzer Hara by not doing things. So that's the Levavcha. Davar acher, another interpretation. Bechol levavcha, with all your hearts, something like that. Shelo yeh libcha chaluk al hamakom. This is interesting, and I will tell you truthfully, I am struggling a little bit to totally understand what's going on here. Okay, literally, I'll translate it for you. It says, in other words, shelo yeh libcha, that your heart should not be fragmented regarding God. So, on one level, it sounded to me like what it's saying is, again, the idea of your heart being fragmented, meaning certain things where you can love God and it's easy to love God, and other things where, well, maybe I'm not so sure, give you maybe this is an example, how could God allow the Holocaust? And I know there are various situations where people will say, you see, God doesn't exist. And I think that's what it's talking about. That even in those particular situations, you still believe in this amazing, ineffable creator and loving that God also loves us. So we're breaking this apart, and with all your soul, this you may be familiar with. Afilu, even if unotel et nafshecha, in other words, even if he takes your soul, even if you die performing a mitzvah, or in the course, again, a situation that might involve martyrdom, that's what it might be talking about. To still love God, even under that circumstance.
Rabbi, my
Yes,
one for all your heart, it
yes.
says your heart should not be in dissension with God.
Okay. Okay, nice. Well, I think that's my explanation. No? Maybe not. Maybe what
Fragmented, I don't know.
I know that was the way so
But
Safaria, the S stands for Safaria. That's how they translated it. Chaluk means division, La chaluk means to divide up.
Hey, Rabbi, I never thought about this before, but Rabbi Akiva died violently. Also,
Yeah,
Rabbi
yes, he
Akiva.
did. And
I just
he's
thought
yes,
yeah, I just
right,
paralleled the Holocaust with Rabbi Akiva's death. He was thanking God while he was dying.
correct. He was saying the Shema. He
Yeah.
was reciting the Shema as the mitzvah. Lauren, let me go back to, can you tell me your translation? Because I think I'd like to type it in, if you will.
yeah, well, it says your heart should not be in dissension with the omnipresent.
Okay.
I think that's, makom, maybe because it's
Right. Oh,
place.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. Yes. Okay. And that's Chabad
Yeah.
or Art Scroll, or it's
No,
different.
it's Chabad.
Okay. Should not be, what was the word?
In dissension.
Okay.
Good job.
Once in a while. It's nice.
So you have no comment on that about the parallel?
Say that again.
You have no comment on that parallel because usually for historically um, they try to discredit esoteric Judaism like Rabbi Akiva.
I'm not
But
sure.
so do you have?
Forgive me. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mike. Go. What are you saying? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, people are always seeing the Holocaust in a bad way, but not in a good light. I mean, with the Rabbi Akiva, he was the way he saw his death while he's being tortured, just like you said. So if you're going through hardship, then like you said, you're still thinking God. So
Right.
Rabbi Akiva uh, was saying, don't take this away from me. This is what I've been waiting for my whole life. And he had a Kabbalistic out. So do you think that the Jews don't approach the Holocaust with that point of view? most of the time? Is that's what they're missing?
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
what they're
Okay,
not
so
doing?
I want to be careful about making broad sweeping generalizations, but let me back up a little bit. First of all, this particular part about the fragmentation or dissension has to do with the levavcha. Okay, I'm just saying this for clarification. The part with
Yeah.
Rabbi Akiva has to do with the next station, Bechol Nafshecha, right? Because what the story goes that his students said to Rabbi Akiva as he was being tortured to death, they said, even now you want to acknowledge God's sovereignty? And he said, you have this story, I think you were quoting from it. He said, all of my life I didn't know if I would be able to perform this part of the Shema, that is to say, whether I was really capable of loving God with all my soul. Okay, that's the part. And he says, and now I realize I can. Now I'm in that situation and I can. So the part about the indissension, which I think you're referring to as far as the Holocaust is concerned, or am I wrong, Mike? Are you not referring to that?
But that's a very Kabbalistic viewpoint too, right?
Well,
With Rabbi Akiva's interpretation of his death.
Well,
I don't know that it's necessarily Kabbalistic. I mean, my sense is it's a matter of being affirmed in your faith and trying to fulfill this particular mitzvah. You
and
know,
I would not compare it to the Holocaust because what
Exactly. See,
what
that's
Rabbi
what most Jews do. They don't
because what
they wouldn't
Rabbi
compare Rabbi Akiva's death and his
no
appreciation
no
of it
no
with the
no and
Holocaust.
here's why because Rabbi Akiva was being martyred. The people in the Holocaust were not all people who had faith and affirmed their faith while or before they
Oh,
died.
okay.
Some of
So
them
they didn't have faith as a Jew, so that makes it different, right?
they
That
weren't
makes the
being martyred for faith, right?
yeah, no, they were been martyred simply because they were Jews. And because Hitler and the Nazis believed that Jews were like the Unglück of Germany. They were, they were child molesters and thieves and what have you.
Well, they were being killed for, like non-scientific racial reasons,
Yes,
pretty much,
exactly.
but not
That
be,
too.
it
Yes.
really was not related to their faith.
No, correct. No, I don't think it had, at least not from what
It
the
was related to their visibility as a
yeah.
Jew or
Right, right. No, good point.
So you
Go on.
okay? So the appreciation of Kabbalah, you're narrowing down to an individual's appreciation of it rather than
a group
any other
can
ability.
confirm their faith. It has nothing to do with whether it's an individual or a group. It has to do with faith and whether they have it and whether they express it and affirm it, while they're dying or knowing they're about to die. That's, you know, choosing to turn their death into martyrdom. But if you that's it's sort of a
Oh,
decision of
okay. So you're
faith.
saying
It has nothing
because
to
it
do
was
with whether it's a group or one person.
yeah. I read a story about
Mike, we're losing you. I'm so sorry. Let me keep going, okay? I want to continue, if that's okay. All right. So we've got V'chol Mo'odecha now, that third piece. And this is also, it looks to me, Sham means Ibid, so this must also be in Brachot, Tractate Brachot, on page 61b. Bechol Mamoncha. Here they mean with all your substance, with all your money. Yesh lecha adam. There are pieces, and this is whether this is a continuation of the quote from Brachot. I think it could be right. There are people shemamono chaviv alav migufo, whose money means more to him than his body. In other words, giving up his body, yeah, not a big deal, but giving up his money, God forbid. Right. So there are people who see famous Jack Benny routine, with a robber says to him, your money or your life, and Jack Benny's response is, I'm thinking about it. Okay. I mean, that's the classic situation here. Okay. Lachach ne'emar, and for this reason it says uvachol mo'odecha. In other words, that's why it's adding b'chol mo'odecha, because uvachol nafshecha, with all your soul, you might think would include, because here nafshecha is meaning your physical person, your physical being, and here it's your substance. Davar acher. So here we go. Another interpretation. Uvachol mo'odecha, when we talk about uvachol mo'odecha, we're playing on the word mo'odecha, b'chol midah u'midah shemodeh lecha, meaning with every measure, midah is a measurement, shemodeh lecha, which he measures out to you, meaning whatever your fate happens to be, you should still love God for that. For everything God does to you, you should love him for that, right? Bein midat tova, whether it's a good measure, bein midat puranut, whether it is a measure of retribution or punishment or something like that, something that feels like that. V'chein, and likewise, David hu omer, right? So that King David would say, and of course, we're going to quote a psalm because the psalms are attributed to King David, and this is Psalm 116. Kos yeshuot esa, I will lift up my cup of salvation. And it says, right, Uveshem Adonai Kra, and I will call upon the Lord, and goes on and says, Tzara v'yagun imtza. It says, trouble and tribulation I shall find, etc. Doesn't matter. Still, lifting up the cup to God and acknowledging God. Right. So, the thing that also occurred to me is that if you want to look at all the material, the oceans and oceans of halacha and midrash and all this, rabbinic work and all that happens subsequently, but I would say especially within the generation that is the creation of the Talmud and the Mishnah, etc., I would say that the rabbis were trying to put into practice that is the underlying implication of all this material, is that it's trying to, as I might say, I use the metaphor of saying, giving feet, giving legs to that concept, because it isn't just about feelings, it's about doing. Right? And doing with a certain intention and a certain desire, and a desire here to try and express a love for God. But that sort of explains everything, and especially the idea of when the rabbis made their rules, the rabbanans, which were basically to protect the Torah itself, because it was all out of love. Excuse me. Going on. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela, and these words, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, which I command you today, al levavecha, they shall be upon your hearts. So my understanding, okay, well, we'll take a look at the Rashi first. Let's take a look at it. Here we go. V'hayu hadvarim, and these words, umahu ahava v'hayu hadvarim ha'ela, right? And what do we mean by love? And what do we mean by these? Let's see, this could be the answer. In other words, Rashi, yeah, I'm pretty certain this is how the sentence is flowing, is what Rashi's telling us. He's saying that statement which says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and your mind. And now the Torah is going on to say, well, what do we mean by that? V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela. It means that these words, shemitoch kach, that are from this, right? Atam makir b'kodesh baruch hu. Because if in fact you think about these words, right? If they're on your heart constantly, you will recognize the Holy One, blessed be He, umedabek bidrachav, and you will cling to His ways. This is a quote from Sifrei. Mitzavcha hayom. What do we mean, command you today? And again from the Sifrei, Lo yu beinecha. These words shouldn't be in your eyes. You shouldn't consider these words. Kediyot kama, like an edict or an ordinance, yeshana, like, oh, it's no longer applies. And it's, of course, so true, right? That people look at the laws in the Torah and say, well, they're out of date. They shouldn't be that way. She'ein adam sofna, right? Because a person doesn't care about these laws, ella kechada, but look at it, right? That, in other words, don't look at these as out of date, no longer applying, etc., right? Which a person doesn't care about anymore, ella kechadasha. But look at them as new, she'akol ratzin nikrata, where everybody's going to take a look at what's the new situation, what are the new laws, etc. And again, how true is this describing how so many look at the Torah, right? The temptation not to take these things seriously, not to see them as something that are actually, as it says elsewhere, Hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu, that these words are actually our life and the length of our days. But they were given by men 2,000, 3,000 years ago. They really don't apply. They don't represent, accurate thinking as we've eventually developed it. And it's saying, don't do that. Don't do that. I'm not saying, of course, that you can't look at it and put on a lens of modernity to these words and try and understand these words perhaps as we currently understand these things, all right? But nevertheless, to see them as being eternal and eternally valid, and that they are, when we say they're our life and the length of our days, this isn't just cute words. This is, in fact, how we feel about it, that we really believe. Okay.
The original rules were given during Jewish rule, and the new interpretations are given during the carrying them through modern rule under other governments, right?
One second. Remember, we have the oral law. The oral law is precisely the circumstances alter cases. The fact is we still have these rules, but we sometimes have to adapt them in a way that fits a current situation. Okay. So that, I think, is the genius, as you might say, of this system that we have within Judaism. So going on, diotgama, what's this word diotgama? Obviously not a Hebrew word. Mitzvat HaMelech. It's got to do with the commandment of the king, Haba'a b'michtav, which comes in the shape of a letter. In other words, the written commands, the written laws of a king, in this, and of course, there we're talking about a system of government that essentially utilized the notion of a monarchy. But whether it's a monarchy, I mean, we also see that that particular desire to rule as a king isn't dead and buried, okay, despite the fact that there have been major attempts to find a way to have what is less personal and more representing the desires of the people. But nevertheless, this is, when it comes to God, we have one God, and we try to have that relationship with God where Hashem becomes our Elohim. And I will leave it there for this time. Excuse me, hold on a second, sorry. Oh, don't know what I'm doing here. Let's see if I can, there we are. Okay, let's see here. Okay, and I will put in our marker, and we'll know where we want to start with the next little part.
Is there anything that says that there will be a reintroduction of new laws? I think that's the Mashiach, right? That will be like a new set of laws instead of interpretations.
I think there are constantly interpretations that have to apply to modernity. They didn't have electricity back then. Well, how do we look at electricity? They didn't have automobiles back then. How do we look at automobiles, etc.? There are many situations which we encounter that are still nevertheless impacted by halacha. Now, point that you're making is this. So Jeremiah, I believe it's in Jeremiah, who talks about the Messianic age as being a time when there will be an inner desire on the part of humanity to observe, to follow God, to allow God to be their Elohim. Okay? And Zechariah as well. At the end of the Alena, we say these things. There are, in fact, Mike, reflecting what you said, there are some beliefs that in Messianic time, because people will have an inner desire to do the will of Hashem, to do the will of God, that some of the laws that are in place right now will no longer be applicable. I have not made a great study of that. I am aware of it. But right now, I'm more concerned about the fact that we are not in Messianic time. And sadly, a lot of what's going on seems to represent a high degree of narcissism and not and a denial of the fact that there is a power above us that gives us our minds. And even if we can, how can I put it, deconstruct the process by which human intelligence developed. And I'm reading a book now about how human intelligence developed. Nevertheless, the process by which that development took place, I believe, is ultimately comes from a transcendent source. Okay, the system itself is not its explanation, or not its ultimate explanation. So that while we may have amazing ways nowadays to understand and the instruments that we need, etc., and brilliant minds that have come up with theories that sound, that are very interesting, etc., we didn't give ourselves our brain power. We didn't give ourselves our intellect. These all came. They may have developed, we could say naturally, we could say that, and we might be able to explain how it naturally came about. But nevertheless, it all comes from an external source, a transcendent source. So with that, I am going to end today.